US says no way to Huawei, a StarTree party. Hackers get some spare change. IBM is bulking up AWS. Zerto makes Allerta reliant. And we take a look at all the big news from RSA and Red Hat Summit this week on the Gestalt IT Rundown. Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the May 8th episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. And remember that it's International Golf Day. But I hope you're not listening to us on the golf course because, we're a little bit loud around here, and that's okay. I'm Tom Hollingsworth. I am your wonderful host, and joining me on this International Donkey Day is Mr. Stephen Foskett. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for being here. It's great to be here on National Have a Coke Day. Have a Coke and a smile, Tom.
All right, we were going to jump into the news this week, and I'm going to let Stephen kick it off with us.
Excellent. The U.S. isn't pulling any punches with China this week. The Commerce Department announced that they're revoking the licenses that allowed U.S. companies to sell chips to Huawei, which is still sanctioned by the U.S. This means that companies like Intel and Qualcomm will no longer be able to provide chips for systems like the new MateBook X Pro, which is the first AI-powered computer in China. The move is seen as a political way to bring more pressure against Huawei, which is reliant on Intel chips for their consumer products. Tom, what's your impression of this move?
It feels to me like there's part of the US government that really doesn't like Huawei right now. And we've known that for years because they were funding bills to be able to pull Huawei equipment out of internet service providers and basically doing everything they can to kind of tank Huawei's future. And this is just another one of those death by a thousand cuts kind of things. By specifically revoking the licenses that allowed companies like Intel and Qualcomm to sell those chips, what they're basically saying to Huawei is good luck. You're going to need to find more of the things that you've been using in sources that are in China. Although, according to analyst reports, there's a pretty good possibility that they're going to start sanctioning Chinese companies that are selling things to Huawei. And I think the most telling part of this is that everybody was super happy about a year and a half ago when it looked like Huawei was kind of on the ropes and there really wasn't a whole lot of help coming their way, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to run them out of businesses and this is going to be great for us. And then they had some partnerships with some companies and developed a new 5G chipset, and of course this new MateBook AI powered PC, and suddenly they're making money again. And oh yeah, we can't stand for that. We can't have other companies making money. So I think that this is kind of a signal from the US federal government that what they really want to do is they want to make sure that Huawei is kind of stepping forward and, I don't know, saying that they're not going to be spying on American citizens, but I don't see the US government making the same request of US companies not disclosing information to the NSA and other places. So I feel like this really is targeted, but I don't know that this is really going to have much of an impact. I mean, Huawei is either going to buy from companies that they can, or they're going to develop their own stuff internally. And I mean, we just saw a new 8K get released by Intel, and they're like, yeah, this is not that huge of a deal. I mean, it's going to move our guidance down kind of into the middle of our range instead of maybe like, towards the upper side of our range. But realistically speaking, I mean, this isn't going to break anybody's bank right now. It's just going to be a little bit more foam on top of the simmering trade tensions that we've seen for so long. Stephen, StarTree, which is built on the open source Apache Pinot database, just announced some new updates aimed at enhancing real-time analytics and observability. Originating from LinkedIn, Apache Pinot scales impressively and has won over major clients like Uber, DoorDash, and Walmart. StarTree's managed offering prioritizes real-time and external-facing analytics, but has expanded to include internal use, focusing on query capabilities for storage observability. The announcement highlights StarTree's integration with popular tools and frameworks for observability, the addition of a vector index support for AI use cases, and introduction of StarTree Third Eye for sophisticated anomaly detection and root cause analysis. Furthermore, StarTree has revamped its data ingestion capabilities with new write APIs and has shifted from a trial mode to a free forever plan. You had a chance to sit down with StarTree and kind of understand what they're building here. What's your take on this?
Yeah, if you've been watching the rundown much, you know that I've been getting more and more into data and analytics. This happens when you have a background in storage and you start investigating AI applications. Suddenly you realize just how important data and data warehouses and query engines are to basically everything that we do. So it was really a pleasure to sit down with StarTree. First off, the thing that I loved about them the most was that this is a very practical team. They're trying to solve regular real world problems for real customers, not trying to shoot the moon with some kind of crazy technology. That being said, it's pretty impressive stuff. So a lot of these companies, as you mentioned, have adopted Apache Pinot as a real-time observability database solution. Essentially, Apache Pinot was a way to ingest data, to keep data up to date, and to expose it for analytics applications. But like so many of these open source projects these days, it's awfully hard for enterprises and non open source focused organizations to use these things. And that's where companies like StarTree come in. Essentially, they have a managed service offering based on Pinot that does all the cool stuff that the big guys like. But they're announcing some cool stuff this week, and let's kind of dive through that. First off, you can now use StarTree in an observability context. Again, many companies were already using Pinot this way, but now you can use StarTree this way. Companies have often used Elasticsearch or MySQL because they know it and they're familiar with it. I mean, full disclosure, I've got Prometheus and Grafana running on MySQL backend. That's just sort of a normal thing that people do, but it's not a great solution for it. Now, companies can use StarTree to basically build better observability systems that are more scalable. Their goal is to have this whole thing be PostgreSQL compliant, so that it's a very familiar dialect, a very familiar interface to that. And that's frankly a nice move in itself. But they're doing some other things too. A big one is adding vector index support. Many people are aware that machine learning is very focused on vector databases. And by having a vector index, StarTree is basically saying, hey, look, you want to use the same data warehouse for machine learning and generative AI? Well, now you can. Another announcement is this third eye offering, which does root cause analysis and anomaly detection. Now, this is not a shake and bake thing. You don't just switch the third eye button. But that being said, it is some cool technology, and I could see some data folks really getting into it. And then also the big thing is that they've got a write API now. Most analytics systems don't really do ingestion. You ingest somewhere else, and then you use the analytics system only to pull and query. Well, now you can push data in, and it can be directly integrated into the analytics workflow. So instead of having to have it go some other direction. In summary, I mean, StarTree's offering is pretty cool because it's not sort of a adopt this and everything else goes away. It works really well with a lot of the tools that people already use, like Kafka, for example, or Prometheus or Grafana. And it makes a lot of those tools work a lot better. As you mentioned, they do have a 30 or a free trial. They had a 30-day trial previously, but now they're basically just saying, hey, give this a try. If you like it, we'll talk to you and maybe we can use it more. So kudos to the StarTree team. Look forward to seeing more from you. Change Healthcare had to pay their spare change to a hacking group. This service provider found itself under attack from ransomware on February 21st from AlphaV. You probably heard about this in the news. The assault took down a nationwide payment network for doctors used to charge patients and medical insurance claims. In fact, it took down my own doctor's office, and they knew that I was in the InfoSec space, and so they asked me what I thought of it. Hackers were able to steal customer data, and there are reports that Change declined to pay the ransom in order to get the systems back up and running. Oh, wait, no, they didn't. They paid it. In fact, I hear that they might have even paid it twice. The total cost of the ransomware attack in the first quarter of 2024 has been stated at $872 million. What did Change Healthcare get for their small change?
They got a lot of nothing. They got to avoid being sanctioned by oversight boards and things like that. Although it's funny because the only way they could pay Alpha V was to actually use a third party intermediary, and I think that is also something dumb. What's the first rule of ransomware? You never pay. But however, it's $875 million worth of not paying that got them to this point. Although that amount does include them having to pay that ransomware uh, fee. This just means that AlV now has enough operating capital to be able to do this again, and they've proven that it works. And you may remember that the Change Healthcare thing, they got bought a couple years ago by United Healthcare, and that was already under dubious enough circumstances. But I've heard all kinds of craziness coming out of this where like some of the providers that were using Change Healthcare are like going into receivership because they can't pay their bills because they can't bill, and they're actually getting snapped up by other larger companies. It's like, oh, well, if you can't pay your bill to us, we might as well buy you. And then that way we can write off the debt. It's dumb. I don't like it. And it just means that the ransomware infection system has now found a new vector to be able to attack these things. We've talked all this time about how attacking hospitals is a bad idea because you're going to raise the ire of U.S. Security Central Command, and they are going to go after you, as our friends over at the Risky Business Podcast say all the time. Unleash the hounds because you're attacking people in emergency rooms. Well, now we're not actually going to cause that problem for you. We're just going to make it so you can't pay for the hospital visit. And that's going to put pressure from the insurance companies on these organizations to put in better controls. And if you go back to Security Field Day 11, we recorded a great roundtable discussion with our delegates about cyber insurance and how much pressure they can bring to bear for these kinds of security controls. I honestly think that we're going to start seeing this more and more from companies that work more directly with these large insurance companies, essentially saying, if you don't put some controls in place, we're going to stop paying, or we're going to pay less until you put them in place to prevent these kinds of things from happening. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm a company and I don't bill anything for 3 months, I'm not going to be a company for much longer. IBM is partnering with Amazon Web Services to enhance deployment and reach of its software solutions globally. This marks a shift for IBM, which previously relied primarily on its own proprietary cloud infrastructure and is now embracing market leading AWS. It also enables IBM to expand availability of its software to 92 countries throughout the AWS marketplace, demonstrating the scale and influence that Amazon Cloud has. This partnership helps IBM reach new markets, but does it help a potential competitor and possibly even sideline IBM's own cloud efforts?
I think that that's the angle that some people have taken with this story, but I don't see it that way. Essentially, yeah, IBM has their own cloud infrastructure as a service offerings, but IBM is much, much more than an infrastructure company. And the offerings that we're talking about here are some pretty high end, high level, and frankly, profitable stuff. Essentially, this is the Watson X ecosystem. So we're talking about Watson X AI, maybe even the new Watson X governance offering, Watson X data. These are strategic solutions for huge multinational corporations, not a bunch of cloud servers or cloud services. So I'm not at all surprised to see IBM decide, you know what? The best way to get these services out there to the market is to adopt a SaaS solution that is available in more countries and more places and has more capability, and that's AWS. As you mentioned, AWS is available in an astonishing 92 countries now. And by putting all of these solutions in the AWS marketplace, it means that IBM's customers have access to this in all of those locations. This is a huge step forward for a company like IBM, and it recognizes the reality of the modern market. I know it seems weird to think that somehow a bookstore company became an infrastructure provider, and IBM, of all people, is a high end business intelligence and AI solutions provider. But that's the reality today. And I think that this whole move makes a ton of sense. I urge you to read on in the linked article by Stephen Dickens. I don't think anyone knows more about the IBM ecosystem than Stephen. I got to spend some time talking with him about this, and his views really did change my mind about IBM overall and their fortunes in the future. Zerto's security platform is now a part of HPE's premier AI-powered storage lineup. Cyber Resilience Vault is integrated into the HPE Elytra Storage MP. The platform, which was recently showcased at Security Field Day, provides detection and recovery features from cyber attacks such as ransomware. Zerto's solution allows for immediate immutable data copies to be isolated and locked down to prevent infection while also providing tools to help bring that data back online in the event of a disaster. Tom, you were at Security Field Day. Seems to make sense that Zerto and HPE's storage would be tightly coupled. What did you think?
I think that they have a really good solution here. And part of the reason for that is because they are attacking the ransomware as it lives in your system. One of the things that a lot of the other solutions out there in the market are really focused on is stopping it from getting into your environment, right? So, this is the old castle wall, bastion host kind of argument. Well, what happens whenever the raiders get into the castle? Because I'll give you a hint, it's not pretty. I've seen this in multiple old Hollywood movies. Basically, once the system gets in there, it can wreak havoc on everything. What they're effectively doing here, Zerto, is they are creating a system where you can do immutable backups. So, like, I'm going to rewind the clock back to when I used to do this for a living, something like 15 years ago. And my biggest worries about disasters were fire sprinklers going off in the data center or a tornado hitting your building. Now, the more likely disaster is someone encrypting all of your data. The result is the same. Everything's still lost. You've got to get it all back. The only difference is that you don't have to do the cleanup work of actually pulling the building off of your hard drives. You just have to figure out how they were able to get in. So this cyber resilience vault basically says, I'm going to create an immutable copy. I'm going to make sure that nothing can touch it. And then if something were to happen and we've detected that the files have been encrypted or destroyed or something like that, I am going to send this information so that I can restore from that immutable copy and get you back up. Like, their recovery point objectives can be as low as seconds if that's what you want. And I encourage you to go back and look at the Security Field Day videos that were recorded. There's more to it than just like detecting that files were encrypted by ransomware. There are actually some really insidious ways to do it, like preserving file headers and then writing garbage to a database file so that a cursory glance at the file header, it looks right and it looks like it's the right size, but there's nothing you can read from it. And so there's some insidious ways that attackers are getting in there, but thankfully there's some smart companies like Zerto that are really trying to jump in and figure out how to keep this from happening. So kudos to the folks over there at Zerto for making that happen.
Tom, there are two big events happening right now this week. And although we're not there, happily, our colleagues from the Futurum Group are. And we've been able to follow along remotely. Those two conferences are the Red Hat Summit in Denver, as well as the RSA conference, which I know that both of us have attended previously. So let's take a look at some of the news coming out of those two conferences. Now, I'm going to start with you and RSA since, again, you know this security space extremely well, and I know you've been keeping a close eye on all the news coming out of the RSA summit. So, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing, what is the important news, and what's the takeaway for people who aren't there?
So there's actually a lot of news coming out of RSA. This is the product announcement capital of the world when it comes to security. The first one is the fact that Cisco is announcing a lot of integrations with Splunk and their XDR platforms. They also have renamed their cloud detection and response Panoptica. So bravo to that. It definitely sounds very Overwatchy. They're working on getting this big integration put together so that you can actually use Splunk with their products. I highly applaud that because you spend that much money on a company, you want to make sure that you're using them effectively. So, one of those things, watch this space for more information coming out soon. I know that our Futurum colleagues will have a lot to say about this. One of the other things that I saw that was really exciting was swim lane. You may recall that I've written some stuff about swim lane already this year, talking about some of their new AI powered security features. But one of the things that allows swim lane to really thrive in this environment is their automation capabilities. Well, they just announced a new marketplace. And what that is going to allow you to do is to go out and download automation integrations, playbooks, things like that to essentially augment your automation story. That's super valuable because nobody deploys automation all at once. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this marketplace thing takes off. Another big piece of news that came out was our friends over at Cato Networks. You may recall they're a SASE company. They released their Control SASE threat report for the first quarter of 2024. One of the big things that I got out of this is that they're now saying that zero-day attacks are not the biggest threat to companies that are out there. It's the fact that they're sending unencrypted data across the WAN at frightening regularity. So when you think about it, not just the data, but the protocols that are used to communicate that, they're not operating on an encrypted tunnel basis. They're not even operating with a zero trust threat model. They're just blasting the data out there. And so this threat report is basically saying, don't do that anymore. And, Cato's spent a lot of time kind of building towards this idea of doing zero trust SASE across the WAN. So I think that, there's something to this. I'm going to have to dig into that report. The last one is a company that actually did present at Security Field Day just a few weeks ago, and that's Palo Alto Networks. They now have some new solutions powered by Precision AI. It's an AI system that combines machine learning, generative AI to help do real-time security and safety. Things like posture management, runtime security. They're integrating AI into all of those pieces. And of course, they have new add-ons to Cortex, which is an SOC platform that's also integrated with Precision AI. So you can see kind of some of the hints in here. We're getting some AI focused functionality from some of the larger companies like Palo Alto and Cisco, but we're also going back to kind of what we consider to be our bread and butter with some of the smaller companies. And there's literally in the linked articles just like hit after hit after hit of companies that are including these things. They're releasing reports, they're releasing products. So you're going to need to tune in and definitely check that out. I know that Shira Rubinoff and Krista McComber have been talking to a lot of companies on the floor at RSA. There's been some interviews, there's been some sit-down discussions. So make sure you tune into the Future and Group coverage, because one of the things that's super valuable is you're going to get the analyst insights for what matters from all of these announcements and how they're going to affect your security strategy and your deployment in the future. All right, Stephen, Red Hat Summit is also happening this week, and there's been a lot of news around it because there's two big things that are coming out of it. The first one is kind of related to AI, and it's InstructLab, which is an open source project aimed at improving LLM outputs. Not to be outdone by that, we now have Red Hat Enterprise Linux AI, which is a platform specifically designed to run IBM Granite LLMs. Now, a lot of people have been watching the space because they know that IBM, kind of being the parent company of Red Hat, has a vested interest in how Red Hat can be leveraged as a platform to sell more cloud offerings, but also to help improve the AI fortunes of Big Blue. Does the outlook for what's going on with IBM and Red Hat lead to more of an AI dominance in that space, or are we just kind of hoping to play catch up with the people that are already out there making all of the money?
Well, I think that to echo the sentiment that I'm hearing from the Red Hat CTO, Chris Wright, I think that this is doing AI the Red Hat way. Up until now, there's been a lot of focus on developing huge proprietary LLMs and how important those LLMs are. Now, the priority and the focus is shifting toward making practical use of these things. And that's what Red Hat is doing. And that's what makes what this whole announcement and all the news that I'm hearing makes so much sense. So, a big shout out to my colleague, Paul Nashawati, who is there. He's been relaying some of this information to me. And I really think that what I'm hearing from Red Hat is AI the Red Hat way. In other words, they're taking all of this work that's being done across the entire ecosystem, the entire AI ecosystem and open source ecosystem, and they're bringing it together and packaging it up nicely for enterprise users to leverage. So a couple of things that I really want to zoom in on. First off, as you mentioned, we have the Red Hat InstructLab. Now, this is an open source project, an open source development released under the Apache license by IBM Research and Red Hat. And it essentially takes those IBM LLMs and allows you to fine tune them using knowledge and skills taxonomy and synthetic data that they've developed. In other words, this really is something of a lab. If you imagine, taking, this big vat of chemicals and mixing and mixing and mixing and coming out with your own special sauce, your own special LLM, that's what InstructLab is all about. Essentially, you can get in there, you can work with the pre-trained Granite models, you can work with this data, you can work with all of the other stuff that they're bringing to bear, and you can come out with a very useful fine-tuned model that doesn't require a data center full of GPUs and a PhD to build. Makes a lot of sense. The other thing you mentioned is the fact that these Granite models are also being made available as basically RHEL AI. There again, it makes a lot of sense for customers to approach AI in this way. Rather than trying to develop their own models, how about we leverage the ones that exist and figure out a way to deploy them at edge, core, in the cloud, that sort of thing. They've also got other things in addition to LLMs. There's an image mode. They're extending most of their products with additional AI and ML features. Of course, there's lots of Ansible and AI collisions, and I'm going to be spending some time digging under the hood there because, of course, I'm an Ansible user myself, and so I'm eager to see how they're doing that. I think that overall, as I said, the message from this is that AI is not a monolith. AI is not a single thing. AI is a lot of things, and you have to look at it from the perspective of the application. For most enterprises, that means a hybrid cloud perspective, which means that you've got to be able to run these models in-house against your in-house data. You've got to be able to tune and train these models with your own needs, with your own data set. And you've got to be able to deploy these things in a way that makes sense to you. And I think that that's really what Red Hat is saying here, that it's all about flexibility. You can deploy this in the cloud, you can deploy it on site, you can deploy it in the data center, you can deploy it at the edge. And all of these things can leverage the power of some of these big IBM developed Granite models or other open source models. And I mean, that to me is the right approach to AI. So I'm pretty excited to see what they're doing. I'll be spending a lot more time with Paul and the rest of our colleagues that are there at Red Hat Summit to learn about this. And I know that you'll be hearing about it on our podcasts and at our field day events going forward. Tom, we've got a few events coming up in the weeks ahead, starting off with one of your own. And let's see, is this next week?
You're right. This is next week. I'm really excited to be bringing you the next edition of Mobility Field Day 7. Well, not 7, it's 11. What's the 7 for? Wi-Fi 7, because we're going to be hearing a lot about that technology while we're there from a lot of companies. And I also want to say that we do have a very special introduction from a new company called Eno. They're doing AI enhanced Wi-Fi design. So make sure you check that out. 15th and 16th of May. Tune in. The schedule's on the website. Make sure you're following us on LinkedIn. And then, Stephen, coming up at the end of the month, you're back with us.
Absolutely. So Paul Nashwati and I are heading to AppDev Field Day, May 29th and 30th. So take a look at that. That's going to be a really exciting event with lots of modern application development stuff and a lot of the topics that we talk about here on the Rundown. We're also headed to Click Connect June 3rd through 5th, which is the same week that Tom is headed to Cisco Live. And I want to point out that we've got Cloud Field Day coming up June 12th and 13th, and of course the annual 6.5 Summit as well. And Tom, I mentioned you're going to Cisco Live. You're also going to HPE Discover, right?
That's right. We're going to be at HPE Discover. We're going to be with our friends at Aruba because this year Aruba Atmosphere and HPE Discover are a combined conference. So we're going to be getting updates on the latest announcement from Aruba. You may have seen that they have a Wi-Fi 7 access point now, but we're also going to be talking about private 5G. We're going to be talking about SASE and all things related to SD-WAN. And there might be a few other surprises in there too. We get to do the keynote in the Sphere this year. So I'm going to see if I can figure out how many access points it's going to take to cover that whole thing. Stay tuned for the answer. Just like you should stay tuned for all of the great coverage that's coming out of our Gestalt IT Rundown. Remember, we're here every Wednesday. We'll be collecting the stories and making sure that everything is up to date and ready to go. And you should make sure that you are subscribed to us in all the up-to-date methods, whether that's our YouTube channel, whether that is on our website at gestaltit.com, or whether you're following along in a podcast format. No matter how you take your news, we will be delivering it to you every week. We are looking forward to a lot of busy times coming up, so make sure that you are staying on top of everything that's being announced by tuning in with us. Stephen will be back next week with another co-host to cover for me while I'm out at Mobility Field Day. But until then, take care of yourselves, enjoy what's left of spring, and we will see you next week.